notes, okay? But if you if you have your Bibles, I'm going to ask you, pull them out, flip to Ephesians, because that's where we're going to be this morning. So my first question, okay, is, and you can put up my first slide here, Jim, the next one actually, is this. January 1st. What does that say to you? I'm going to come back to that for a second. I was writing this sermon, talking with Pastor, and again, you know, if you can, read your bulletin a little bit and find out some of the prayer requests. Pastor Cross and his family are not here. Cheryl, his wife's mother, passed away last Sunday. If you were here, we prayed for Cheryl to go, and I think this is really cool. Pastor shared with me that we prayed for Cheryl and for her family. They left directly from here, drove 2 hours and 40 minutes to try to get to Indiana before her mother passed away. Minutes of her passing. They just in time to be able to sing with her and to see her pass on. And I think that's a really cool moment for them to be able to have, for them to be able to see that. And it's sad, it's terrible. I know yesterday was the funeral. And again, I got to speak with Pastor, and he said, first off, thank you for the prayers, we sent the flowers, and it was just a wonderful time. Why? Because she is in heaven. And they said, it's a party, it's sad, we grieve, but she is in heaven. And I think that's such an amazing reality to live in, of going, we're going to see her again, right? Grief is a little bit different in that mentality. And all the things that we can start off a new year, I was sitting and I'm like, what do I preach on the first Sunday of 2024? And I went, I'm a super cliche kind of guy. I'm kind of a nerd. I'm a goofball. And I went, hey babe, to my wife. I'm gonna start with some statistics. And she goes, wow, that's like the most cliche thing ever to do. I was like, then I'm definitely doing it. Before I give you those statistics, we come back to this question of January 1st, what does it say to you? Because whether you want to admit it or not, it does say something. It sparks something in us, good or bad. It sparks something. And I'm going to ask you, okay, I'm a youth pastor. I love give and take. What does it say to you, one word, if you can just shout it? That's great. Great. Any others? You guys nailed it. You guys nailed it. Okay, so January 1st, here's the things that come to mind. I'm going to refresh what we just talked about here. New beginnings. I heard somebody say that. Fresh opportunities, renewed ambitions and plans. Chances to relinquish sin or repair broken relationships. Eat better. Swear less. Run more. Finish projects. Find a new job. Work less. But make more money. But still work less. Read more books and watch less TV, or read less and watch more TV. Spend more time outside, travel, experience new things, on and on. There are these things that stir up in us. This year I'm going to blank, right? Millions of people around the world have something that stirs in them. And I promise you some facts. So here's some facts of 2023. Firstly, let me start before we read those. Don't read them yet. 47% of people, okay, these are on average, all right, feel encouraged entering this upcoming new year, 2024. 47%. As opposed to 22 feeling discouraged, and then the rest being kind of 50-50. 60% of Americans under 30 feel overwhelmingly hopeful for 2024. But studies show that everyone over 30 is way smarter, okay? Here's some of the stats that I found from last year, and these are kind of year to year, very similar. 48% of people say they want to improve their fitness, while 36% cite mental health improvement as a top priority. 38% of people want to improve their finances, 34% of people want to lose weight, 25% of people want to spend more time with loved ones, 12% to stop smoking, 9% want to learn a new skill, 7% want to improve work-life balance, 6% say they want to travel more, 3% say they want to change their alcohol intake, and equally 3 people desire to improve their workplace ethic. I find this fascinating. Why? Because, again, year to year, the resolutions are very similar, aren't they? I want to feel better. I want to be better. Funny enough, 62% of people feel pressured to make a resolution in the first place. When you dig a little deeper, it's funny because we are a church body, and so, okay, what do these statistics have to do with our faith? Well, I dug a little bit, and when you look, you could find something regarding our religious resolutions. 30 to 50%, which is kind of a broad number, okay, but 30 to 50% of people entering a new year desire to increase their relationship with God. Those 3 words, relationship with God. The desire is there, right? Half of us. Here's my issue, though. Relationship with God is a very broad thing. It's very broad. In fact, if you look at if you could go back to those stats for a second, Jim, many of these top ones on here are very broad. I want to improve my fitness. Okay. I want to eat better. What does that mean? Right? Over and over, I want to improve my fitness, improve my finances, lose weight, and on and on and on. And I don't know about you, but I am somebody, and I've learned this about myself, and I don't love it, but it's true. I desire to have things reduced to their lowest denominator. I want something simplified. I want something put in its simplest form. Otherwise, I struggle to succeed. If you tell me to lose weight, I go, how? What am I supposed to do? You want to know? I want to know exactly what food I'm eating. I want to know how much time I'm spending working out. I want to know the exercises specifically that I do. But I don't want to know them from Darren because I won't do them. Okay? I want to know how many reps I have. I want to know what snacks are allowed. I want to know the list to a T. But unfortunately, almost every survey I found had the same wording for their resolution regarding faith, which is, I want to improve my relationship with God. What does that mean? Massive spectrum of possibilities, and the problem is, it's too broad. And this isn't meant to be an insult. This is meant to be reality and a check for ourselves. Sometimes as Christians, the whole world, yes, but specifically for us in here, we need to be spoon-fed things. Sometimes, hey, do this, do this. Start a plan. We need options in order to succeed. Doesn't say just go succeed. It's a reality, and unfortunately, when that reality begins to fail, we see the results, which happen to be the same in our spiritual life as it is in our secular life, which is this. You can put this up here. The resolutions typically last 3.75 months. Up to 23% of people quit in the first week. Month 2 and 3, only 22% of people stick with the resolution. Months 4 drop to 13, and then it keeps dropping to 9, and so on, until it's under, on average, 2% that people keep their resolutions. Now, if you compare this to the world, these are surveys, obviously, with a set number of people, but if you compare this to the world, 2% of people succeeding at something they desire to do, that's still something to be praised of and to shower people with, hey, great job. But it's hard to fathom in this moment, if there's 100 people in here, that 2 of you are going to succeed at your resolution. That's hard to think about. I don't know about you, and again, this sermon is littered with cliches because it's the first Sunday of January. I don't want to be a statistic, okay? I don't want my relationship with God to fall in a statistical place on a scale where people can go, here it is. John was a part of that percentage. I know I'm 35, so obviously I'm a lot smarter than those under 30, as I said, okay? But I will tell you that I have a lot of positivity going into this new year. I truly believe that the Lord has never stopped working, and yet I think he's going to do even greater things. But the heart of today's sermon comes from the mentality of unbroadening our desire to grow closer to God. Hear me when I say it doesn't mean don't grow closer to God. It means simplify it. The great martial arts master, I think, put it really well, Bruce Lee, when he said this: long-term consistency trumps short-term intensity. Now, I think that's obviously a martial arts. It's applied to physical feats of strength and working out and those things like that. But when we apply this to our biblical life as well, I think it applies. I don't know about you, but I've gone into situations with my faith where I'm changing everything right now. I'm never going to swear again. I'm never going to hurt somebody's feeling again. I'm never going to get mad at somebody who cuts me off in whatever. Fill in the blank. And then 3.75 months later, I'm ticked. Yeah. In other words, stop saying I want to get closer to God in general and instead devote yourself in one way today that actually improves your relationship. Our passage today, you can open up if you have it, is Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10. And it's 3 verses today. That's it. That's it. And I'm going to warn you now, my sermon isn't insanely long at all. However, there is a challenge at the end that, well, I hope you do. I can't make you, but I want us to be partaking in today. And we're going to have an opportunity to do so. If you can, let's read this together. I'll read it today. You can follow along. Chapter 6, verse 10 starts with, "Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly spaces. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm." We've read this verse before. Most of us have heard of what the armor of God is, and that's not the focus today. It's important. It's not the focus today. Let's look at verse 10. I love that beginning with this verse in our sermon today is the words "finally." In reality, when I was reading this and I went, man, this is where I think the Lord is asking me, pushing me to preach. How do I start the first Sunday of January with "finally"? Right? This should be an end of the year sermon. And I went, well, let me read it. Because I love that it starts with exactly what he's telling us to do. Finally, do this. And it's important to look at where we're coming from, right? Paul is coming in hot with this letter to Ephesus, right? Throughout Ephesians, Paul is laying on these people the callings of the Lord and how we are to be faithfully following him. Verse 10, he then stamps it and he goes, "Finally, after everything I've been saying to you, finally, I'm about to drop the biggest piece of wisdom on you." And then he does. He says here, it is for everyone. Here is how you face your greatest issues. Here's how you face your greatest enemies. Be strong in the Lord. And it must be important for us, right? Be strong in everything we do, be strong in the Lord. But the question is why? We know it's important. Paul is saying it must be important. Paul says a lot of really good things to a lot of churches, which we're going to look at in a second. But why? Why is this so important? Well, it must be important for Paul to be including it in this. And if anybody knows anything about Paul, the thing that we can trust is this: Paul doesn't just talk the talk. Cliche. He walks the walk, right? We know all about Paul and the things that he has done. He has clearly lived out these challenges. How do we know this? Well, in this case specifically, it's because, as with a lot of his letters, where's he writing it from? Prison. He is in prison. He's literally the living embodiment of practice what you preach. But again, okay, but still, why is this so important for the people of Ephesus? And why is it so applicable, pertinent for us this morning and today? Well, I'm going to answer that question, but I want you to all understand this. This passage, this verse, specifically 12, one of my favorite passages, it is a deep dive. And we're not doing a deep dive today, but there is so much complexity here, and it answers this question of why is this important? How do we begin to apply it? And firstly, Paul, okay, our guy Paul, he's coming from a lifetime of experience about Satan's perseverance. And Satan's perseverance is kind of a weird reality of one of the major things in our sermon this morning. Not only in his own life of Paul, but in the lives of those he meets, where he travels to the city that he goes to, his friends, and all these people. He goes into the belly of the beast, places that he knows are dangerous. Many of his letters are directed at churches, places surrounded by persecution. Groups of believers or would-be believers who are in pain, who are experiencing suffering and discrimination, losing their way, and in some cases completely turning away from God. That is where Paul is called. And this is a question for you to think about internally. Where are you being called? Because I don't want to go to the belly of the beast. I don't even know where that is or where that setting would be, but the idea of it sounds terrible. God, I love that you call people, just leave me out. At Bethany, in the next couple weeks, Pastor Cross is starting a sermon series on an important topic within the church, and it's about being a member of a church. And Paul identifies some of these things in his letters because he writes to churches. He writes to bodies of believers. Why is it important to go to church? Why are we called to join a body of believers? And join meaning become a member, become solidified in it. What are your blessings that can come out of that decision? And then how do we do it? Is it really that important? Questions that maybe some of you sitting here have or know someone who's considering. In today's sermon, hopefully, this topic is aimed at simplifying that. These verses in Ephesians 6 paint a picture for us that aim to simplify complexity. And details are good. Details usually lead to more complex things. And it's important to know them and to dive into them, but today I'm going to just stress it's simplify, simplify, simplify. There's three things that I'm going to say that are going to simplify these verses for you. Here they are. Trust in the Lord, number one. Know who your enemy truly is, and armor up. That's what those verses are saying. And again, you can look at those verses and look at the complexity and the details of what it's saying. But at its crux, at the end of it, it's saying these three things. First, trust in the Lord. Know who your enemy is. And then get ready because battle is coming. And if you're looking at a great place to start reading, maybe for the new year, you don't have to start in Genesis. You can open up the Bible anywhere. And if you're looking for a place, open up to Ephesians and read the chapters preceding this one. These passages highlight the biblical calling of what it is to live a faithful life. What does that look like? It gives us details that lead us all the way to where we are today in verse 10. And it says it's a reminder, right? This is the culmination of those verses. After everything I've told you for 6 verses, finally be strong in the Lord, because this is going to suck. This is going to be hard. Everything I just told you, guess what? I'm in prison. Trust me when I say, it's not where I want to be. Be strong in the Lord, in his might, not your might, not my might, not our pastor's might, his might. Get rid of our desires, our ambitions, our wants, nothing but his power. So why is this so important? Well, here's the thing. When we have joy and trust and strength in the Lord, I told you that kind of one of the big things about this sermon is looking at Satan for a second. Well, guess what? One thing that joy and trust and strength in the Lord and hope in the Lord, guess what all of that does? It drives Satan insane. He hates it. He despises it. He despises God prevailing. He despises when we devote our life to faithfully trusting and walking with the Lord, right? He doesn't want that. He wants the opposite of that. The funniest part is that Satan is already fighting a battle he's lost. It's over already. And yet he still hates it, and he despises every decision that we make of faithfulness with God. His ambition is pointless. And yet, how many of us truly know the battle's already won? Well, I'd say most of us know that. Do all of us trust it every moment? I know that I don't, because I sin still. I know that I don't always because I let things affect me. 3.25 months hit and I shut down. I revert. I go back to what I was sometimes, right? And sometimes, like you said, somebody said, it's within minutes. I go, I'm never going to do that again. And then Satan goes, well, here's a chance to. The victory is already won. His ambition is pointless, and yet it still happens. If we look at Ephesus and we follow when it says, as laid out by Paul in the earlier chapters, these are some of the things it calls from us. Calls to unify instead of divide, to love instead of lust, to choose light instead of dark. Rather than foolishness, we choose wisdom. Instead of love and liquor, we choose fullness in the Spirit. Instead of living in a self-serving circumstance over and over again, we choose to allow the Lord to shower us in his blessings. Do you not think that all of those things aim to glorify God? Well, then why wouldn't Satan be livid about it? Everything he wants is the opposites of those things. Of course, it's because he's losing. It means his power is diminishing, and his grasp on us cannot compete with God's hands. And yet in Ephesus, Paul is literally seeing the power of Satan and the power that he can have over people's immorality and sinfulness. Paul challenged them. He writes these letters, turn away. Why? Because you're fueling Satan. And Paul knew this because he was there. What did I say? He went to the belly of the beast. He said, I'm going to practice what I preach. I'm going to walk the walk. I'm not just going to talk I'm going in. God is sending me in. And I feel like for that mentality, this isn't biblical, but I feel like for me, to have that mentality, I have to go and go, okay, do your worst. Because I can't do this alone. Satan, come at me. Paul, over and over again, was ran out of synagogues. He was pursued by cultists. He was threatened by idol makers and worshipers. And despite his accomplishments and leading people to the Lord, performing miracles, growing the church, one thing that we know about Satan is this thing that we've already said. He is relentless and persistent. He does not go away, and actually, reality, the more blessings that come, the more his attempts come to upend God. And we see this because it's not just on you and I that he tries these on, is it? Satan is bold. We remember he went after Jesus. He tempted him for 40 days. He bashed him. He went at him so hard that Jesus sweat blood. Can you imagine sweating blood? And I think this is so important because, again, over and over, it's, man, hey, us, don't mess up. Well, okay. How do we do that? Well, look at the example. Satan went at Jesus hard. And Jesus said, do your worst. This battle's done. It's already over. But go ahead and try. Satan wants nothing good. For us, for Jesus, nothing. And so Paul, a man who was eventually confined to chains in portions of his life, continuously did one thing, and he praised God. Continuously, he writes and encourages cities and groups, stop living in sin. Turn your eyes towards Christ, trust in the Lord and in his might of his strength, because Paul knows the power of evil, of even 1 ounce of God's power. 1 ounce of God's power is enough to beat Satan. You think about that? And so Satan goes, okay, I got to go harder, and I got to go harder, and I got to go harder. I could do all things through him who gives me strength. We cannot do it alone. We try. It's been 7 days into the new year, and I think if you had a resolution, you've tried to do it on your own already. Can't do it ourselves because if it was up to you and me, we'd kill each other. We'd hurt one another. Right? We would wreak havoc on everyone and everything. We would choose foolishness and drunkenness and pride and divisiveness. Maybe we'd choose all of it. But we are instructed to trust in the Lord and in his might and to armor up, because we get to verse 12, if you look at there with me. The battle is not with each other. My hatred for Darren that I have is not, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. We go at each other though, right? We take these things and we hold it on to somebody. We put things that don't go our way, we give it to somebody else because that's easier. We take these moments when it's really Satan attacking us and we attack one another. Our battle is not against each other. It's not your neighbor. It's not your brother. It's not a people group or races. It says very plainly in verse 12, our battle is not against any flesh or blood. Our conflict is manifested by the spiritual forces of evil. And I think this really reshapes a perspective that we have for loving one another. Even furthermore, how often in churches do we fail at that? People come to church, and again, there's a lot of cliche reasons people come to church. It's the new year. I'm going to start going to church. That's one reason. I'm hurting. I need healing. Something bad happened to me, and I want to change it. I'm dying. On and on, there's reasons left and right that people come to church. I know for a lot of our students, it's because my friend asked me to come and it's Friday night and I had nothing else to do. Oh, it's Christmas Eve or morning. I guess I'll go to a service with family because that's where they're going. It wouldn't be what I chose. And yet opportunity after opportunity comes before our congregation, before us in this church to love each other. And again, I'm going to say this, Satan does not want that to succeed. He wants it. Reality is, as soon as somebody new comes in the door, we go, why are you here? No, you can't have a mug. Please sit in the front row. Right? I mean, but for really, we do these things, right? We have prejudices and we have things that go in our mind when we should be loving each other. We have divisiveness. Right? And it's called one thing. We're supposed to love each other because our battle is not with each other. Our battle is with evil, with sin, with Satan. And it's funny, and I want you to think about this, and this is not for me, but this is for Pastor Cross. This verse specifically, when Paul talks about it, is primarily aimed at pastors. If you guys don't know, being a pastor is hard. And I'm like B-level, but pastor, he's got a hard job. Caring for a flock, understanding what the needs of the church are. Looking at the community, how can we better run this place? Who needs to be empowered in a position? How do I deal with conflict? How do I deal with people I don't like? That's none of you, okay? How do I do all of these things, right? And Paul says, our battle's not with flesh and blood. Why? Well, it's important for you to know that as a pastor because the better you do, the worse it's going to get. The more Bethany grows, the more crap that comes in the door. And I know Pastor, one of his talents, he's a counselor, and I would love to see people just lining the door. I don't know that he would love that. That would be hard. Can you think about the resolutions? His would be, I got to improve my mental state. Can't do this. We have 4 elders. We need like 30. That's great, and I want to see a church that gets that point. Why? Because that means that we're loving each other amongst the stuff that walks through the door. We can order more cups. That's a good thing. And yet, we come and Satan goes, I don't want this. This verse comes in clutch for everyone who's ever been discouraged by missions. And let me give you a news flash here. I don't know anybody else in here who is an ordained pastor, and that's fine. But guess what? Pastor meaning shepherd. And if you've ever talked to somebody about the Lord, guess what? You're pointing somebody to Christ, as a shepherd can and does. So guess what? You're missionaries. Every one of us. And so you're on the mission field. Maybe it's not another country, but there's still war. Right? And so we come in and we go, okay, if I'm a missionary, this is hard. I can't do this. Well, Paul goes, guess what? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Our battle's not with one another. It's with the evil. Right? It's with the things that are manifested, the spiritual nature of evil. Paul preached and remained in some of the worst places in the world, including Ephesus, even knowing the risks, the dangers, the outcomes of his own life. And prosecuted. And the reason he did this is because he had one thing, the strength of the Lord and his might at his back. He had the armor of God engulfing him and the knowledge that every single time things got worse or tougher, it meant that the might of the Lord was being shown actually. Right? It means that every time things escalated for good, or for bad, that means there was so much good happening that it needed to be combated by Satan. He was ticked. He didn't want this to be the case. The truth of the gospel was showing out, and we know that Satan wanted nothing more than to shut it down. Pastors and missionaries can feel exhausted and burdened when things get hard, but the truth is that Satan will attack those things because if the Lord's work is being done, Satan will not fail to oppose it. Unfortunately, I'm going to say that is a truth you can hang your hat on. It's true. So we're in a battle here. It's not with each other. The evil one wants us sin to manifest in us and to use that against every one of us as we use it to bring each other down, and that's false, right? It's a lie. And I saw this in my own life. I don't know. I shared with you guys that at Thanksgiving that my wife and I bought a house, and so this last week I spent the week with my wife and my mother-in-law packing and lifting and sorting and cleaning, getting ready for this. Was our first home, so this was a big deal for us. And when we started the process and we got further enough where we go, hey, if we get this house, this would be pretty cool. And I'm a very optimistic person. My wife is a realist. And I go, hey, babe, that's my wife. If we get this house, I want this to be fun. I want this to be a joyous experience for our family. We have an 11-month-old son. He gets his own room finally, right? All these things come into the culmination of this awesome thing of buying a house. The sorting and the cleaning and the wrapping, you get ticked off. You get paper cuts. Right? These things, this joyous thing gets overshadowed by annoyances. We moved in yesterday. I'm on 4 hours of sleep today. And that's fine. The Lord's given me strength, but I'm tired. Right? And we're exhausted. And guess what happens when all these things culminate? I'm going to put this box here. Not there, John. Read the label. Read the label. That goes in the basement. I forgot we had a basement now, right? So all of these things start happening, right? And sin creeps back in our lives. We start to bicker, and I'm not saying this about my wife and I. I'm saying in general for all of us. We start to bicker. You find yourself annoyed, and you go on because evil is trying to persevere in a good thing. Something that we prayed over and sat and went, God, this is yours. And Satan goes, are you sure? And I know that I could ask every one of you about a moment where you felt a blessing and a joy, and then it got ripped apart. A vacation that you planned on taking that didn't go the way you wanted. An event, a party, even a night alone and quiet gets loud, upended. A thought, an action, something perseveres in us to corrupt our hearts. I don't know what your New Year's resolutions were. I don't know if you made them. I think they're good. I think they can be healthy. Maybe it was a dedication to working out for a year, and if you did it and you only lasted 2 weeks, well, it's 2 weeks longer than maybe you would have, right? It can be a good thing. But I think if we're to desire to grow closer to God, we need to unburden that desire of his broadness. Find a weakness that Satan feeds on and upend it, change it. I want to read the Bible more, but I suck at it. Well, do it. Because Satan's going to try to stop you from doing it. I want to get closer to God. Great. What does that mean? I want to pray more. Great. Well, what does that mean? Well, I want to sit down 3 times a week, 7 a.m. and pray. Great. Do it. Plan it and do it. Maybe it's 1 day a week. Maybe you never pray. 1 time, start. Don't upend your entire desire to get closer to God in its broadness and then fail. My desire for you is this. Consider investing in others. Desires you to sit next to them and pray. Our church body is a wonderful thing. That's the way they were designed. That's what they were created for. An army of believers armoring up to battle against evil. Paul in his writings didn't write to just one church, did he? He wrote to many churches, plural. Rome, Corinth, Galatia, Philippi, Colossae, Thessalonica, Ephesus. He wrote to churches. Bodies of people, believers, urging them not only to take Satan's advances seriously, but also to redevote yourselves to a body of believers rooted in God. stand together in opposition of false teachings. Don't tolerate sin. Collectively be active in good works. And this one is important. I think this one was the crux of our sermon today. Endure hardships together in Christ. Be together. Serve the community. Take the leap of faith. Join a church and see where God is desiring for you to plug in. Dive into the Bible and be a shepherd. You don't need the title of pastor to lead people to the Lord. Pastor usually ends his sermons, and I can invite the worship team up here. He usually ends his sermons with two questions. What are you going to do, and who are you going to tell? And I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to change it a little bit. I'm going to actually have you do something active in 10 minutes. Okay? In 10 minutes. Directly following the service, our deacon team is responsible for highlights of our morning, which is the time after the service where we get to sit and talk to one another. Directly after the service, there's fellowship time at the Friendship Center and coffee and snacks. Here's my challenge. Number 1, do not leave church today without going to the other end for a cup of coffee or a snack. It's challenge number 1. That's easy. We will have people no, I'm just kidding. They're going to be directing you exactly where to go.
The doors are locked.
No. But bravely consider praying. I've never done this. I'm going to do it. Go to the other end and have a cup of coffee and have a snack. Here's challenge number 2. Unburden yourself a little bit today. When you go to the fellowship, I'm going to have 3 questions up here. Can you put these up here for me, Jim? Okay, number 1. I want you to bravely go up and ask somebody. It can be somebody you know, somebody you've never met. What is the biggest praise of 2023? In what way do you desire to go closer to God? And here's my challenge, a little sub-challenge. If it's too broad, ask him to simplify it. And then how can I pray for you? And finally, if you're really brave, pray for him right there. Too many times we desire to pray for each other, and I go, I'll pray for you, and then we don't. And if you do, props to you. I'm not good at that. So take a moment and pray with them at that time. Guys, we practice what we preach. That's the point. Don't be robots. Don't be people that just come to church because it's church. It's the first Sunday of the new year. I better go to church. It's Christmas morning. I better go to church. Don't be robots. Don't just have these things that we have to do because we have to do them. There's meaning behind it. It's not a failed stat if we actually enjoy it and give it to the Lord repeatedly. Another year where we go into the fire to change, but by 2 months we're dead and buried because we couldn't handle it because we weren't giving it to God. And we say, well, I guess I'll just start again next year. Start it right now. Be strong in the Lord and in his might. Our battle is not with each other. So armor up. Know who the enemy is because it's not us, it's not each other. And trust in the Lord. Let's stand and pray. Father, we just thank you for the truth of your word and the gospel this morning. I pray that it would be revitalizing for us, encouraging for us. God, help us because we will fail. This will be tough. This will be difficult. But Father, we trust in you and in your strength and in your might. Guide us and show us where we are to go. Allow us to know your love in everything that we do. In Jesus' name, amen.